Please, just one plate of rice. I haven't eaten in 2 days." The small, dirty boy's voice cracked as he stood before the roadside food stall, his clothes torn and his bare feet covered in dust. The bustling streets of Lagos roared around him, danfos honking, traders shouting, the smell of exhaust mixing with fried plantains. But at that moment, everything seemed to pause. Welcome to Tales by Sammuff. Thank you so much for your incredible support and for making this channel a home for powerful African stories. Before we dive into today's heartwarming tale, please drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Are you in the USA, Jamaica, UK, or right here in Africa? We love hearing from you. Now, let's get into this beautiful story of kindness, fate, and a love that nobody saw coming. Mama Bola wiped the sweat from her forehead with the edge of her faded wrapper as she stirred a large pot of jollof rice. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on her small food stall at the corner of Bode Thomas Street in Lagos. Her wooden table was worn from years of use, and the blue plastic chairs around it had seen better days, but her food was legendary. Workers, students, and passers-by lined up daily for her meals, tasty, affordable, and served with a smile. She was in her mid-30s, a widow who had lost her husband 3 years ago to a sudden illness. Since then, she had been the sole provider for her 2 daughters, Blessing and Faith, who were 8 and 6 years old. Every kobo she made went toward their school fees, rent, and daily survival. Life was hard, but Mama Bola never complained. She believed in hard work, and she believed in kindness. That Tuesday afternoon, as she was serving a customer, she noticed a small boy hovering near her stall. He couldn't have been more than 10 years old, but he looked much younger because of how thin he was. His clothes were nothing but rags, torn shorts and a shirt so dirty it was hard to tell what color it once was. His feet were bare, caked with mud and dust, and his face was smudged with grime. But it was his eyes that struck Mama Bola, large, sad, and filled with a hunger that went beyond just food. "Please, Ma," the boy whispered, his voice barely audible over the noise of the street. "Just one plate of rice. I haven't eaten in 2 days." Mama Bola's heart squeezed. She had seen many street children in Lagos, but something about this boy tugged at her soul. Maybe it was the politeness in his voice, or the way he looked at her with such desperate hope. Without thinking twice, she dished out a generous plate of jollof rice, fried plantain, and a piece of chicken. "Sit down, my dear," she said gently, pointing to one of the plastic chairs. "Eat." The boy's eyes widened in disbelief. "Thank you, Ma. God bless you, Ma." He sat down and ate like he hadn't seen food in weeks, scooping the rice into his mouth with his hands, tears streaming down his cheeks. Mama Bola watched him, her own eyes misting. When he finished, he stood up, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and looked at her with such gratitude that it broke her heart. "What's your name?" she asked. "Tunde, Ma." "Where are your parents, Tunde?" The boy's face darkened. I don't know, Ma. I've been living on the streets." Mama Bola wanted to ask more, but customers were waiting. "Come back tomorrow," she told him. "I'll give you food again." Tunde's face lit up like the sun. "Thank you, Ma, thank you." And so began a routine. Every single day, Tunde would come to Mama Bola's stall, and she would feed him. Rain or shine, whether business was good or bad, she never turned him away. Sometimes she gave him rice, sometimes beans and plantain, sometimes yam and stew. She even started packing extra food for him to take along. Her regular customers noticed, and some of them would leave extra money saying, "This is for the boy." Weeks turned into months. Tunde became a fixture at the stall, helping Mama Bola carry water, clean tables, and pack takeaway orders. He never asked for anything beyond food, and he was always polite, always grateful. Mama Bola's daughters, Blessing and Faith, grew fond of him too, treating him like a big brother. But Tunde never spoke much about his past. Whenever Mama Bola asked about his family, his eyes would cloud over, and he would change the subject. All she knew was that he had been living on the streets for a long time, sleeping under bridges and in abandoned buildings, surviving on scraps and the occasional kindness of strangers. One evening, as Mama Bola was closing up her stall, she noticed Tunde staring at the busy road, watching the cars pass by. There was a strange look on his face, longing, sadness, and something else she couldn't quite place. "What are you thinking about, Tunde?" she asked. He turned to her, and for the first time she saw tears in his eyes. "I had a father once, Ma, a good father, but I got lost, and I don't think he's looking for me anymore." Mama Bola's heart broke. She knelt down and pulled the boy into a hug. "Don't say that. I'm sure your father is looking for you, and until you find him, you have me, okay? You're not alone." Tunde nodded, clinging to her like she was his lifeline. What Mama Bola didn't know was that across the city, in a towering mansion in Ikoyi, a man sat alone in his study, staring at a photograph of a young boy. His name was Mr. Olumide Williams, one of the wealthiest men in Nigeria, a billionaire who owned hotels, oil refineries, and real estate across Africa. But all his money meant nothing to him anymore. Because 3 years ago, his son, his only child, had gone missing. His wife, Tunde's mother, had died when the boy was just 4 years old. Olumide had thrown himself into work to cope with the grief, hiring nannies and housekeepers to care for his son. But one afternoon, while he was in a business meeting, Tunde had wandered out of the house. The security guards had been distracted, and by the time they realized the boy was gone, it was too late. Olumide had searched for years. He hired private investigators, offered massive rewards, put up posters all over Lagos, but there was no trace of his son. Some people whispered that the boy had been kidnapped, others that he had died. But Olumide refused to believe it. He kept the boy's room exactly as it was, kept his toys, his clothes, his books. Every night he would sit in that room and pray for a miracle, and now, unknown to him, that miracle was happening just a few miles away, at a roadside food stall where a kind woman was feeding his son every single day. What do you think will happen when Mr. Olumide discovers the truth? Will he find his son? And how will Mama Bola's life change forever? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story from Tales by Sammuff. We're just getting started with this incredible journey. The morning sun had barely risen when Mama Bola arrived at her food stall. She had woken up at 4 a.m., as she did every day, to prepare her meals. In her small one-room apartment in Bariga, she had cooked pots of jollof rice, fried plantains and beans while her daughters still slept on their shared mattress on the floor. By 6 a.m., she had loaded everything onto a wheelbarrow and pushed it through the quiet streets to her stall. This was her life, hard, exhausting, but honest. And she wouldn't trade it for anything, because it meant her daughters could go to school and have a future she never had. As she was setting up, she heard a familiar voice. "Good morning, Mama Bola." She turned to see Tunde approaching, a bright smile on his face despite the fact that his clothes were still the same torn rags. Over the past 3 months, he had filled out a little, no longer the skeletal boy who had first appeared at her stall, but he still looked like a street child. His hair was overgrown and matted, his skin covered in dirt. "Tunde, you're here early," Mama Bola said, returning his smile. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, Ma. Under the bridge near the market. It wasn't too cold last night." Mama Bola's heart clenched. She had been thinking about this for weeks now, and she couldn't hold it in any longer. "Tunde, come here." "Sit down." The boy sat, looking at her with curious eyes. "You can't keep living on the streets like this," Mama Bola said gently. "It's not safe. You're just a child. You should be in school, sleeping in a proper bed, not under a bridge." Tunde looked down at his hands. "I know, Ma, but I have nowhere else to go." Mama Bola took a deep breath. She had been praying about this decision for days, asking God if she was doing the right thing. She barely had enough money to feed her own children, to pay rent, to survive. But how could she call herself a follower of God if she turned away a child in need? "You can stay with me," she said quietly. Tunde's head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. "What, Ma?" "I said you can stay with me. It's not much, just 1 room for me and my daughters. You'll have to sleep on the floor. And we don't have much food, but at least you'll have a roof over your head. And maybe if I save enough money, I can enroll you in school." Tears filled Tunde's eyes. "Mama Bola, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," she said, smiling through her own tears. "Say you'll stop sleeping under bridges and come home with me." "Yes, Ma, yes. Thank you, Ma. God bless you." He jumped up and hugged her so tightly that she almost lost her balance. Mama Bola laughed, patting his back. Okay. Now help me finish setting up. We have customers coming." That evening, when Mama Bola closed her stall, she took Tunde home for the first time. Blessing and Faith squealed with excitement when they learned he would be staying with them. They immediately started planning where he would sleep and which of their toys he could play with. That night, after a simple dinner of rice and stew, Mama Bola gave Tunde a bucket of water and a bar of soap. "Go and bathe," she said. "You need to be clean if you're living in my house." Tunde bathed in the small bathroom they shared with 3 other families in the compound. When he emerged, scrubbed clean for the first time in months, Mama Bola was shocked. Underneath all that dirt was a strikingly handsome boy with smooth skin and intelligent eyes. She gave him one of the church shirts her late husband used to wear. It was too big for Tunde, but it was clean and whole. As Tunde lay on the mat, Mama Bola had spread out for him on the floor, surrounded by the sounds of blessing and Faith's gentle breathing. He felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years: safety. He closed his eyes and whispered a prayer, thanking God for Mama Bola. Meanwhile, across the city in Ikoyi, Mr. Olumide Williams sat in his enormous living room, staring blankly at the television. His mansion was a palace: marble floors, crystal chandeliers, expensive artwork on every wall. But it felt like a tomb. His personal assistant, Ngozi, entered the room carrying a tablet. "Sir, you have a meeting tomorrow morning with the investors from South Africa. Should I confirm?" Olumide didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the family photo on the mantelpiece. Him, his late wife Folake, and little Tunde, taken just months before Folake died. "Sir," Ngozi tried again. "Cancel it," Olumide said quietly. "But sir, this is an important—" "I said cancel it." His voice rose, and Ngozi stepped back, startled. Olumide immediately felt guilty. "I'm sorry, Ngozi, I can't focus on business right now." Ngozi softened. She had worked for Mr. Williams for 10 years, and she had watched him transform from a driven, ambitious businessman into a shell of a man after his son disappeared. "Sir, have you considered speaking to someone? A therapist, perhaps? You can't keep living like this." "How am I supposed to live, Ngozi?" Olumide's voice cracked. "My son is out there somewhere, or worse, he's dead, and I couldn't protect him. What kind of father does that make me?" "A father who's human," Ngozi said gently. "You've done everything you could. The investigators, the posters, the reward money. It wasn't enough." Olumide stood up abruptly, his hands clenched into fists. "I have all this money, all this power, and I couldn't find my own son." He walked to the window and stared out at the glittering lights of Lagos. Somewhere out there, in this massive city of over 20 million people, was his boy. He could feel it in his bones. Tunde was alive. He had to be. "I'm going out," Olumide said suddenly. "Out? Sir, it's almost 10 p.m. I need to clear my head. I'll drive myself." Before Ngozi could protest, Olumide grabbed his car keys and headed to the garage. He got into one of his cars, a modest Honda, not the flashy Range Rovers and Mercedes he usually used for business, and drove out into the night. He didn't have a destination in mind. He just drove, winding through the streets of Lagos, passing through neighborhoods he had never visited before. He drove through Victoria Island, Lekki, Maryland, and eventually found himself in the more working-class areas: Yaba, Bariga, Bode Thomas. As he stopped at a traffic light, he noticed a closed roadside food stall on the corner. A woman was packing up her pots and tables, preparing to push a wheelbarrow home. Something about her reminded him of his late wife, that same quiet strength, that same determination. The light turned green, and Olumide drove on, but he made a mental note of the location. Maybe tomorrow he would come back during the day and try some of the food. Lately, he had been eating at expensive restaurants, but nothing tasted right anymore. Perhaps simple roadside food would help him feel human again. The next day, Tunde woke up in Mama Bola's apartment feeling happier than he had in years. He helped her prepare breakfast for Blessing and Faith, then accompanied her to the food stall. As they were setting up, a well-dressed man approached. He was wearing simple jeans and a polo shirt. But there was something about him that suggested wealth, the expensive watch on his wrist, the way he carried himself with quiet confidence. "Good morning," the man said. "I passed by here last night and decided to try your food. What do you recommend?" Mama Bola smiled warmly. "Everything is good, sir, but my jollof rice is what people come back for. Would you like a plate?" "Yes, please. A full plate with chicken and plantain." As Mama Bola prepared his food, the man's eyes fell on Tunde, who was helping to arrange the plastic chairs. Something about the boy made him pause. There was something familiar about his face, his eyes, the way he moved. "Is that your son?" the man asked. Mama Bola glanced at Tunde and smiled. "Not by blood, sir, but by love. I'm taking care of him." The man nodded slowly, still staring at Tunde. Tunde looked up, met the man's eyes, and felt a strange jolt in his chest. He didn't know why, but this man's face triggered something deep in his memory, something warm, something safe, something he had lost a long time ago. But before he could process the feeling, the man looked away, taking the plate of food from Mama Bola. "Thank you," he said, and sat down to eat. The man was Mr. Olumide Williams, and he had no idea that the dirty street boy helping at this roadside food stall was his missing son. Mr. Olumide Williams sat at the plastic chair outside Mama Bola's food stall, eating slowly. The jollof rice was delicious, perfectly seasoned, the chicken tender, the plantains sweet and perfectly fried. But he wasn't really tasting the food. His eyes kept drifting back to the boy who was wiping down tables and helping the woman serve customers. There was something about that child, something that made Olumide's chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't name. The boy's movements, the shape of his face, even the way he smiled at customers, it all felt hauntingly familiar. "Tunde, bring water for the customer," Mama Bola called out. Olumide froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. Tunde. The boy's name was Tunde. The child came over with a sachet of cold water, smiling politely. "Here you go, sir." Olumide stared at him, his heart pounding. What's your full name?" Tunde hesitated, looking confused. "Just Tunde, sir. I don't remember my last name." "You don't remember?" Olumide's voice came out sharper than he intended, and Tunde stepped back slightly, looking nervous. Mama Bola noticed the tension and came over quickly. "Is everything all right?" "Sir?" Olumide forced himself to breathe, to calm down. He was being ridiculous. Tunde was a common name in Lagos. Thousands of boys were named Tunde. Just because this child shared his son's name didn't mean anything. And yet... "How old are you?" Olumide asked the boy, his voice gentler now. "I think I'm 10, sir. Maybe 11. I'm not sure." "Where are your parents?" Tunde's face fell, and he looked down at his feet. I don't know, sir. I've been on the streets for a long time." Mama Bola put a protective hand on Tunde's shoulder. "Sir, if you're finished with your food, I can pack you another portion to take home." Olumide realized he was making the boy uncomfortable. He nodded slowly, reaching into his pocket for his wallet. He pulled out a 1,000 naira note, far more than the meal cost. "Keep the change," he said, standing up. The food was excellent. Mama Bola's eyes widened. "Sir, this is too much. The food is only 300 naira. "Consider it a thank you for a wonderful meal," Olumide said. He glanced one more time at Tunde, then turned and walked back to his car. As he drove away, his hands were shaking on the steering wheel. His mind was racing. Could it be possible? After 3 years of searching, could his son have been right there in front of him? But how could he be sure? The boy was so different from the well-fed, well-dressed child who had disappeared from his mansion. This Tunde was thin, dressed in oversized clothes, his hair unkempt, and he said he didn't remember his last name. Memory loss. Street children often experience trauma that affected their memories. Olumide had read about this during his desperate research into missing children. When he got home, he went straight to his study and pulled out the file he kept on Tunde's disappearance. He flipped through the photos. His son at age 7, smiling at his birthday party. He zoomed in on the child's face, studying every feature. Then he tried to imagine what that boy would look like now, 3 years older, malnourished, sun-darkened from living on the streets. The resemblance to the boy at the food stall was striking. Olumide's hands trembled as he picked up his phone and called Detective Ibrahim, the private investigator he had worked with for years. "Mr. Williams," Ibrahim answered, "I wasn't expecting to hear from you today." "Ibrahim, I need you to investigate someone. A woman who runs a food stall on Bode Thomas Street and a boy who works there, about 10 years old, calls himself Tunde. I need to know everything about them, where the boy came from, how long he's been with the woman, everything." There was a pause. "Sir, are you saying you might have found—" "I don't know," Olumide interrupted, his voice tight with emotion. "I don't know yet, but I need to find out. Can you do it discreetly? I don't want to scare the boy or the woman." "I'll start immediately, sir. Give me 2 days." 2 days? Olumide hung up and sank into his leather chair, his heart racing. Could it really be? After all this time, could God have finally answered his prayers? Meanwhile, back at the food stall, Mama Bola was counting the money from the day's sales. The 1,000 naira from the well-dressed man had made a significant difference. She would be able to buy new shoes for Blessing and Faith, and maybe even get Tunde some proper clothes. "Mama Bola," Tunde said quietly, "that man who was here earlier, he asked me strange questions." Mama Bola looked up. "What kind of questions?" "About my parents, about my age, and when you called my name, he looked at me like he had seen a ghost." Mama Bola frowned. She had noticed the man's odd behavior too, but she had assumed he was just another wealthy man with too much time on his hands. "Don't worry about it, Tunde. Some people are just curious. As long as he didn't make you uncomfortable." "He didn't," Tunde said. "But Mama Bola, there was something about him. When I looked at him, I felt, I don't know how to explain it. Like I knew him from somewhere. Like maybe I had seen him before, a long time ago." Mama Bola's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? Do you remember something about your past?" Tunde closed his eyes, trying to grasp the fleeting memory. "I remember a big house, and a man who used to carry me on his shoulders. He smelled like expensive cologne and coffee, and he had a deep voice, and he would sing to me before bed." Tears started streaming down Tunde's face. "But then everything went dark, and I can't remember anything else. I don't know how I ended up on the streets. I don't know what happened to that man." Mama Bola pulled him into a hug. "It's okay, Tunde. Your memory will come back when it's time. God has a plan for everything." But inside, she was troubled. What if Tunde really did have a family somewhere? What if someone was looking for him? And what if that man who came today was connected to Tunde's past? That night, as she lay on her mat with her daughters sleeping beside her and Tunde on the floor nearby, Mama Bola prayed, "God, if this boy has a family, please reunite them. But if not, please give me the strength and resources to take care of him properly. He deserves so much more than I can give him." 2 days later, Detective Ibrahim sat in Mr. Olumide Williams's study, presenting his findings. The woman's name is Bolajoko Adeyemi, but everyone calls her Mama Bola. She's a widow, 34 years old. Her husband died 3 years ago from malaria complications. She has 2 daughters and makes a living from that food stall. She's well respected in the community. People say she's honest, hardworking, and very kind. "And the boy?" Olumide asked impatiently. "The boy appeared at her stall about 3 months ago, begging for food. She started feeding him daily, and recently she took him into her home, according to my sources. She told her neighbors that she couldn't bear to see a child sleeping on the streets. She's been clothing him and treating him like her own son." "But where did he come from before that? Where had he been living?" Ibrahim shook his head. "That's where it gets complicated, sir. The boy himself doesn't remember much. I spoke to some street children and vendors in the area. They say he's been on the streets for years, moving from place to place, sleeping under bridges and in abandoned buildings. Some of them remember seeing him around the time your son went missing, but no one knows exactly how he got there." Olumide's jaw clenched. "Is there any way to know for sure if he's my son?" "DNA test, sir. It's the only way to be certain. But to do that, you'd need to get a sample from the boy." "How do I do that without alarming him or the woman?" Ibrahim thought for a moment. "You could go back to the food stall, become a regular customer, build trust with them. Then perhaps you could offer to help the boy, take him to a doctor for a checkup, something like that. During the examination, we could collect a DNA sample." Olumide nodded slowly. It was a solid plan, but it would require patience, something he was running short on. Still, if there was even a chance that this boy was his son, he had to do it right. He couldn't just barge in and demand answers. He needed to be careful, strategic. "All right," Olumide said. "I'll go back tomorrow, and Ibrahim, keep investigating. I want to know everything about that boy's movements over the past 3 years." "Someone must have seen something." "Yes, sir." After Ibrahim left, Olumide walked to Tunde's old bedroom. He stood in the doorway, looking at the toys, the books, the small bed that had remained untouched for 3 years. On the nightstand was a framed photo of Tunde and his mother, taken shortly before she died. Olumide picked up the frame and studied his son's face. Then he closed his eyes and made a promise. "If that boy is you, Tunde, I will bring you home. I don't care what it takes. I will bring you home." The next morning, Mr. Olumide Williams returned to Mama Bola's food stall. This time, he came with a plan. He would become a regular customer, earn their trust, and slowly find a way to confirm what his heart already knew, that the boy serving food at this humble roadside stall was his missing son. And when he did, he would make sure that both Tunde and the woman who had saved him would never want for anything again. What do you think will happen when the truth finally comes out? Will Mama Bola lose the boy she's come to love? And how will Tunde react when he discovers his real identity? Drop your comments and predictions below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for Tales by Sammuff. We're just getting to the best part of this incredible story. Over the next 2 weeks, Mr. Olumide Williams became a fixture at Mama Bola's food stall. Every morning at exactly 9 a.m., his modest Honda would pull up to the curb and he would order a plate of jollof rice or beans and plantain. He would sit at the plastic table, eating slowly, watching Tunde move around the stall with quiet efficiency. At first, Mama Bola was surprised by his consistent presence. "Sir, you must really love my food," she joked one morning as she served him his usual plate. Olumide smiled. "Your cooking reminds me of home. My late wife used to cook like this. Simple, flavorful, made with love." Mama Bola's expression softened. "I'm sorry for your loss, sir." "And I'm sorry for yours," Olumide replied. "I heard you're a widow as well." Mama Bola nodded, wiping her hands on her apron. "Yes, sir. 3 years now. Life has been hard, but God has been faithful. He gave me strength to provide for my daughters, and now he sent me this boy to care for." She gestured to Tunde, who was clearing plates from another table. Olumide's heart clenched as he watched his possible son work. The boy had gained a little weight in the past few weeks. His cheeks were fuller, his eyes brighter. Mama Bola was feeding him well, taking good care of him. "He's a good boy," Olumide said carefully. "Very polite, very hard-working." "The best," Mama Bola agreed, her face glowing with motherly pride. "When he first came here, he was so thin and sad. Now look at him. He smiles, he laughs with my daughters, he helps me without being asked. God sent him to me for a reason." Olumide felt a pang of guilt. This woman had saved his son when he couldn't. She had fed him, clothed him, given him a home. And now Olumide was going to take the boy away from her. But he had to. Tunde was his flesh and blood, his only child. "Mama Bola," Olumide said slowly, "I've been thinking, the boy works very hard, but has he seen a doctor recently? Children his age need regular checkups, vaccinations, that sort of thing." Mama Bola's smile faded. "I know, sir, but doctors are expensive. I can barely afford school fees for my daughters. I've been praying that God will provide, but for now, I just make sure Tunde eats well and stays clean." "What if I paid for it?" Olumide offered. "I could take him to a good hospital, get him a full medical checkup. Consider it my way of saying thank you for the wonderful meals you've been serving me." Mama Bola looked conflicted. "Sir, that's too generous. I can't accept—" "Please," Olumide interrupted gently. "It would mean a lot to me. I lost someone very dear to me, and helping Tunde, it helps me heal. Please allow me to do this." Mama Bola studied his face. There was genuine kindness in his eyes, and something else, a deep sadness that reminded her of her own grief when her husband died. Finally, she nodded. "All right, sir. If you're sure it's not too much trouble, Tunde really should see a doctor." "It's no trouble at all," Olumide said, relief flooding through him. "I can take him tomorrow morning if that's all right with you." "Tomorrow?" Mama Bola hesitated. She had just met this man 2 weeks ago, and now she was supposed to let him take Tunde to the hospital? What if he was a kidnapper? What if he had bad intentions? Olumide saw her hesitation and understood immediately. "You can come with us," he said quickly. "I wouldn't expect you to just hand over the boy to a stranger. We'll all go together." Mama Bola relaxed. "Okay, sir. Tomorrow morning then. But I'll need to open the stall by noon. I can't afford to lose a whole day's sales." "Of course. We'll make it quick." That evening, Mama Bola told Tunde about the plan. The boy's eyes widened with a mixture of excitement and fear. "A hospital? But I'm not sick, Mama Bola." "I know, dear, but healthy children need to see doctors too. It's just to make sure you're growing properly. And the kind man who's been eating here every day is going to pay for everything." Tunde frowned. "That man, Mr. Olumide, right? That's what I heard you call him." "Yes, Mr. Olumide Williams. He's a good man, Tunde. He's been very kind to us." Tunde nodded slowly, but something about the situation made him uneasy. He couldn't explain it. Mr. Olumide was polite, generous, never did anything threatening, but every time the man looked at him, Tunde felt like he was being studied, examined, like Mr. Olumide was searching for something in his face. That night, Tunde had a dream. He was in a big, beautiful house with white walls and marble floors. A woman with a kind smile was singing to him, stroking his hair. Then the scene shifted, and he was in a garden, playing with a ball while a man watched him with loving eyes. The man picked him up, spun him around, and Tunde laughed with pure joy. "I love you, Daddy," Dream Tunde said. "I love you too, my son," the man replied. "I will always protect you." But then the dream turned dark. Tunde was running, crying, calling for his father, but his father was gone. Everything was gone. And suddenly, Tunde was alone on a street, surrounded by strangers with no idea how he got there. He woke up gasping, sweat soaking his borrowed shirt. Mama Bola heard him and came over quickly, kneeling beside his mat. "Tunde, what's wrong? Did you have a bad dream?" "Mama Bola," Tunde whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I think I'm starting to remember. I had a father, I had a home, but something happened and I got lost, and I've been trying to find my way back ever since." Mama Bola's heart broke. She pulled him into her arms, rocking him gently. "Shh, it's okay. Your memory is coming back. That's a good thing, Tunde. It means you're healing." But inside, Mama Bola felt a growing dread. If Tunde remembered his family, if he found them again, what would happen to her? She had grown to love this boy like her own son. The thought of losing him was unbearable. But she also knew that if Tunde had people out there who loved him, who were searching for him, she had no right to keep him. "God," she prayed silently, "give me the strength to do what's right, even if it breaks my heart." The next morning, Mr. Olumide Williams arrived at the food stall in his Range Rover instead of the modest Honda. Mama Bola's eyes widened when she saw the expensive vehicle. She had suspected Mr. Olumide was wealthy, but this confirmed it. He was very, very rich. "Good morning," Olumide greeted them with a warm smile. "Are we ready to go?" Mama Bola nodded, though she suddenly felt self-conscious about her faded dress and worn sandals. Tunde, too, looked uncomfortable in his oversized church shirt and old shorts. They didn't belong in a car like this. But Olumide opened the door for them without any sign of judgment. "Please, get in. The hospital is about 30 minutes away in Victoria Island." The drive was quiet. Tunde sat in the back seat next to Mama Bola, staring out the window at the changing landscape. They left behind the crowded, chaotic streets of their neighborhood and entered a different world. Wide, clean roads, tall glass buildings, luxury shops, and expensive hotels. "Is this where you live, sir?" Mama Bola asked, her voice small. "Yes," Olumide replied. "I have a house in Ikoyi, not far from here." Mama Bola couldn't even imagine what that house must look like. Ikoyi was where the elite lived. Politicians, business tycoons, diplomats. What was a man like that doing eating at her roadside stall every day? They arrived at the hospital, a private facility with gleaming white walls, air conditioning, and smiling nurses in crisp uniforms. Olumide had already arranged everything. Within minutes, Tunde was taken into an examination room while Mama Bola waited nervously in the reception area. Inside the examination room, Dr. Adebayo, one of Lagos's top pediatricians, conducted a thorough checkup. He measured Tunde's height and weight, checked his heart and lungs, examined his eyes and ears, and discreetly, as Olumide had requested, he collected a saliva sample for DNA testing. "You're a healthy boy," Dr. Adebayo told Tunde with a smile. "A bit underweight, but nothing that good food can't fix. You've been eating well recently, haven't you?" Tunde nodded. "Mama Bola feeds me every day." "Well, she's doing an excellent job. Keep eating well, and you'll grow big and strong." After the examination, Olumide took Mama Bola and Tunde to a nearby restaurant for lunch. It was nothing fancy by Olumide's standards, but to Mama Bola and Tunde, it felt like a palace. They had never eaten in a restaurant with waiters, menus, and tablecloths before. "Order anything you want," Olumide said generously. Mama Bola ordered cautiously, just rice and chicken, but Olumide insisted they try the fish, the salad, the fresh fruit juice. As they ate, he asked Tunde questions, gentle, careful questions about his memories, his dreams, his life before the streets, and with each answer, Olumide became more and more certain. The way Tunde described the big house, the garden, the woman who sang to him, it all matched. This was his son. He was sure of it now, but he said nothing, not yet. He would wait for the DNA results to be absolutely certain, and then he would tell Tunde the truth, that he had finally found his father. What will happen when the DNA results come back? How will Mama Bola react when she learns the truth? And will Tunde be able to forgive his father for losing him? Comment below with your thoughts. And if you're enjoying this journey, hit that like button and subscribe to Tales by Sammuff. The most emotional reveal is coming next. 3 days later, Mr. Olumide Williams sat in his study holding a manila envelope with trembling hands. Inside was the DNA test result from the laboratory. Detective Ibrahim stood across from him, watching silently. "Open it, sir," Ibrahim urged gently. Olumide's hands shook as he tore open the envelope and pulled out the single sheet of paper. His eyes scanned the technical jargon, the numbers, the percentages, until he reached the conclusion at the bottom. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. The tested male is confirmed to be the biological father of the tested child. The paper slipped from Olumide's fingers and fluttered to the floor. He covered his face with his hands, and his whole body shook with sobs, deep, wrenching sobs that came from 3 years of grief, guilt, and desperate hope finally released. "My son," he choked out. "He's alive. My son is alive." Ibrahim picked up the paper and smiled. "Yes, sir. You found him." For several minutes, Olumide couldn't speak. He just wept, overwhelmed by a tidal wave of emotions. Relief, joy, gratitude, and also terrible guilt. His son had been living on the streets, starving, sleeping under bridges, while he sat in his mansion surrounded by wealth. If not for Mama Bola's kindness, Tunde might have died. "What do I do now?" Olumide finally asked, wiping his eyes. "How do I tell him? How do I tell Mama Bola?" "Carefully, sir," Ibrahim advised. "The boy has been through trauma. His memories are fragmented, and Mama Bola has become his mother figure. This needs to be handled delicately." Olumide nodded. He stood up, straightened his shirt, and took a deep breath. "Call them. Ask Mama Bola to bring Tunde to my house tomorrow afternoon. Tell her I want to discuss something important about the boy's future." The next day, Mama Bola stood at the gates of Mr. Olumide Williams's mansion in Ikoyi, holding Tunde's hand tightly. Her heart was pounding. The massive iron gates, the sprawling compound, the 3-story house that looked like something from a movie, it was overwhelming. A security guard let them in, and they walked up the long driveway. Tunde's eyes were wide with wonder. "Mama Bola, who lives in a house like this?" "Very rich people, my son," Mama Bola whispered. "Very, very rich people." They were led into a living room so large it could fit Mama Bola's entire apartment 5 times over. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Expensive artwork decorated the walls, and plush sofas sat on gleaming marble floors. Mr. Olumide entered the room, dressed in traditional agbada. His face was a mixture of joy and nervousness. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Please, sit down." Mama Bola and Tunde sat on the edge of the sofa, both looking uncomfortable and out of place. "Mama Bola," Olumide began, "I asked you here today because I need to tell you something important, something that will change all of our lives." Mama Bola's stomach twisted with anxiety. "What is it, sir?" Olumide turned to Tunde, his eyes filling with tears. "Tunde, do you remember I took you to the hospital a few days ago?" Tunde nodded slowly. "The doctor did more than just examine you. With your blood sample, I conducted a DNA test." Olumide's voice cracked. "Tunde, I am your father." The room fell into stunned silence. Mama Bola's hand flew to her mouth. Tunde stared at Olumide, his young face frozen in shock. "What?" Tunde whispered. Olumide knelt down in front of the boy, tears streaming down his face. 3 years ago, you were living here with me. Your mother had passed away when you were 4, and I was raising you alone. But one day, while I was at work, you wandered out of the house. The security guards didn't notice. By the time we realized you were gone, we couldn't find you. I've been searching for you ever since. I hired investigators, put up posters, offered rewards, but you had disappeared, and now, by the grace of God, I've found you." Tunde's breathing became rapid. His hands started shaking. Suddenly, memories began flooding back, not in fragments, but in vivid, overwhelming waves. He remembered this house. He remembered playing in the garden. He remembered his mother's funeral, the overwhelming sadness, his father crying. He remembered wandering out of the gate one afternoon, following a stray puppy down the street. He remembered getting lost, asking for help, but no one understood where he lived. He remembered days turning into weeks, weeks into months, until he forgot his own last name, forgot his address, forgot everything except the vague memory of a man who used to love him. "Daddy?" Tunde whispered, his voice breaking. Olumide opened his arms, and Tunde threw himself into them, sobbing. "Daddy, I'm sorry, I got lost, I couldn't find you." "It's not your fault," Olumide wept, holding his son tightly. "It's not your fault, my boy. I'm the one who failed you. I should have protected you better. But I promise you, I will never let you go again. Never." They held each other, crying, while Mama Bola watched with tears streaming down her own face. Her heart was breaking and rejoicing at the same time. She was losing the boy she had come to love, but he was gaining back his father. This was right. This was good, even if it hurt. After several minutes, Olumide pulled back and looked at his son's tear-stained face. "Tunde, you're home now. You're safe. Everything that was yours is still here. Your room, your toys, everything. You never have to sleep on the streets again. You never have to go hungry again." Then Olumide turned to Mama Bola, who was wiping her eyes with the edge of her wrapper. "Mama Bola, I can never repay what you did for my son. When I had given up hope, when I thought I would never see him again, you saved his life. You fed him, clothed him, gave him a home. You showed him love when he had no one." "I just did what any decent person would do," Mama Bola said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "No," Olumide said firmly. "Most people would have walked past a street child without a second glance. But you saw my son's humanity. You saw his worth. And because of that, I want to do something for you." He walked to a desk in the corner of the room and returned with a folder. "Inside this folder are documents. I'm buying you a proper restaurant space in a good location, fully equipped. I'm paying for your daughter's education through university. I'm giving you a house, nothing as big as this, but comfortable, with enough rooms for you and your girls. And I'm setting up a trust fund that will ensure you never have to struggle again." Mama Bola's eyes widened in disbelief. "Sir, that's too much. I can't accept—" "You can and you will," Olumide said, his voice gentle but firm. "And there's one more thing." He paused, glancing at Tunde, who was still clinging to his arm. "Tunde needs a mother figure. He's been bonded to you for months now. I can see how much he loves you, and I've been alone for so long. I've forgotten what it feels like to have someone to share life with." He took a deep breath. "Mama Bola, I'm not asking you to decide today, but I would like to get to know you better. And if, over time, you feel the same way, I would be honored if you would consider becoming my wife. Not just for Tunde's sake, but because I see in you something rare, genuine goodness, strength, and kindness, qualities my late wife had, qualities I admire deeply." Mama Bola couldn't speak. She just stared at him, overwhelmed. Was this really happening? Was this man, this billionaire, really proposing a future with her, a poor roadside food seller? "I know it's a lot to take in," Olumide said with a small smile. "Take your time, think about it, pray about it, but know that whatever you decide, you and your daughters will be taken care of. That's a promise." Tunde looked up at Mama Bola with hopeful eyes. "Please, Mama Bola, I don't want to lose you. You're my mother now, too." Mama Bola's heart melted. She reached out and stroked Tunde's cheek. "You'll never lose me, my dear. No matter what happens, I'll always be here for you." 6 months later, in a beautiful ceremony attended by family, friends, and even some of Mama Bola's old customers from the food stall, Bolahoko Adeyemi became Mrs. Bolahoko Williams. Tunde stood beside his father as the best man, beaming with joy. Blessing and Faith served as flower girls, giggling in their pretty dresses. Mama Bola's new restaurant, Mama Bola's Kitchen, became one of the most popular spots in Lagos, known not just for its delicious food, but for its policy of feeding one street child for free every day, a tradition Mama Bola insisted on maintaining, in memory of the day a hungry boy walked into her life and changed everything. And every evening, when Olumide came home from work, he would find his wife and son in the kitchen, cooking together, laughing together, being a family. He would watch them and thank God for second chances, for the kindness of strangers, and for the roadside food seller who saved his son's life. What an incredible journey! From a roadside food stall to a billionaire's mansion. This is the power of kindness and faith. Drop a comment and tell us what you think of this beautiful story. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Tales by Sammuff. We bring you the most emotional African stories every week. What should our next story be about? Comment your suggestions below. Remember, a small act of kindness can change someone's entire life. Be a blessing to someone today.